Are you a woman standing at a crossroads, eager for change? It's time to connect with your authentic and empowered self at Boss Leap. Join Dr. Sylvia Morris and Dr. Angela Walker in this empowering community where real-life stories of courageous and talented women inspire and motivate. Engage in honest conversations that foster well-being, drawing from our own journeys. Let us guide you toward profound growth and transformation in both your personal and professional life. Here are your hosts, Dr. Sylvia Morris and Dr. Angela Walker.
Welcome to Boss Leap. I'm Dr. Sylvia Morris, and I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Angela Walker. Today, we are in for a treat. We have Professor Mecca Jamilah Sullivan. Dr. Sullivan is the author of 3 books, Big Girl, which is a New York Times Editor's Choice and winner of the Balconies Fiction Prize and the Next Generation Indie Book Award for First Novel. She is also the author of The Poetics of Difference, Queer Feminist Forms in the African Diaspora, which is a winner of the William Sanders Scarborough Prize from the MLA, and also the author of the short story collection Blue Talk and Love, which was the winner of the Judith Markowitz Award from Lambda Literary. Dr. Sullivan has earned honors from Breadloaf, the Institute of Citizens and Scholars, the Mellon Foundation, the Center for Fiction, the NEA, and many others. Originally, Dr. Sullivan is from Harlem, New York City. She is a professor of English at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. Dr. Sullivan talked to us about certainly her writing, journaling, and self-care. So, Angela, are there as we take this, we are at the beginning of summer. Are there any self-care practices that you want to incorporate for this summer?
Absolutely. So self-care, healthcare, I call it health style. For me, yes. I absolutely love summer. So when you talk about your favorite season, summer is my favorite.
Mine
you've
too.
got the long days, sunshine. If we can throw the beach in there, which I'm definitely planning to get that in. But just to be outside, self-care for me is moving always. And Dr. Sullivan talks about her, which I loved, which you guys will, get to hear, trying new things. And actually, dance is one of them. And so I love line dancing. So if I could go to a wedding.
You have your fan? We got to get our fans together.
I don't have my fan yet, but I've got it down. So I don't have the actual fan. But that movement, just picking something, different to do. So, taking kind of a hip hop class, that I've done recently, and I'll do more of that this summer. I liked the self-care practice that she mentioned of being present. Yes. And so I love to take pictures. Unfortunately, I have so many pictures on my camera and my computer that takes up most of the memory. So it's really kind of shameful, but I love pictures. But I have found recently that I'm trying to just be more in the moment and enjoying what I see in front of me instead of always trying to take a picture of it. I do see value in photos because it does bring back the good memories. But trying to be present for me means sometimes putting the camera down. And
put
enjoying
the phone down. Yes,
exactly. So those are 2, I think, kind of newer self-care practices and trying to branch out and do things in terms of movement that are different. How about you?
Yeah, definitely in terms of being present. One of my favorite expressions is this is a happy moment. And if I am somewhere with someone and there's a joyful moment, I say this is a happy moment to kind of bring us back to the present. And it's also my way of being grateful for this moment and usually the people that I'm with or the sunrise.
Well, you're imprinting that on those around you as well. So I've heard you say that, and it does make you pause and appreciate where you are in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we talk about some self-care practices that I am going to incorporate going forward, or this summer in particular. It's going to sound strange, but vacation. I have not been as good at scheduling my vacations, and I have time off, but then I do a bunch of other stuff, or I'm like, oh, I need to do this one thing for this project, or I need to send this email or do this thing at home. And I have scheduled my vacation. Does involve a beach, so I'm super excited about that. And
Okay,
then
where are you going?
I'm going to San Diego, if you can believe that.
Okay, we'll have to talk offline.
Yes, we will. But I will be spending 5 days at the beach in San Diego. And then later
Nice.
on in the summer, I'll be doing CME, continual medical education, in Boston, which I haven't really spent a whole lot of time in
Time there.
Boston.
Nice.
So yeah, those are my
Love.
self-care plans for the next few months.
Okay, see, we talk enough. I can adopt one of your self-care plans. That's definitely on my list, and I haven't done. So I love that. And as we, during our conversation with Dr. Sullivan, found out that she was doing some of the same. So that is an inspiration, as well as the entire interview. Just an absolute. She's just a dynamic speaker, genuine, authentic, and had so much to share. A laundry list of books and authors to read. And so we are anticipating a lot of information to share, and hope that you enjoy as much as we do. And without further ado, Dr. Sullivan. Hello, and welcome back to Boss Sleep. We are so excited today to have Dr. Mecca Jamilah Sullivan here with us, accomplished writer, wordsmith, woman of such powerful wisdom and words. And I had the pleasure of meeting back at old stomping grounds, Georgetown, when she moderated a panel brought to us by the Women of Brave, another incredible organization of young, powerful women of color who just bring an incredible experience to those around them on campus. But I was impressed and came back and told Sylvia, oh my gosh, we would be so blessed if we could get Dr. Sullivan on the show just to give us her life experience. I know you have so many accolades, Dr. Sullivan, but on the show, we like to know the story behind the person, and would love for you just to share whatever was on your heart. But in the beginning, we typically start with just asking, what shaped you? How did things begin for you in your journey as Jamilah and as just a journey as a writer and a scholar?
Well, thank you so much. First of all, I have to say thank you so much for inviting me to be part of Boss Sleep. That event that where we met at Brave, it was such a powerful event. It was organized by women of color, students at Georgetown. I'm a professor of English at Georgetown. And to connect with alums like yourself was just really fantastic. I was saying earlier, you asked phenomenal questions. So I remembered you as soon as you emailed me and was eager to be part of Boss Sleep. So thank you. And Sylvia, it's wonderful to meet you as well. So in terms of my start as a writer, for me, it actually began very young. I feel very fortunate to have been very well supported by educators, but also by my family. I knew from a pretty young age that I wanted to be a writer, and it was really through reading that, I realized that writing was something that I could even do, right? And that writing about Black girls and Black women and our lives and our bodies, that was something that one could sort of make a life out of. So I was reading Toni Morrison, Audre Lorde, Jamaica Kincaid, and these are all writers who write about Black girlhood, although they're not necessarily writing for young Black girls. But I was fortunate enough to discover their work in my mother's library, and I say library, I mean like on her bookshelf, you know what I'm saying?
It is a library,
It's a library, right? She had this amazing archive of Black women writers and Black feminist writers. And so, when I was still reading Babysitter's Club and Nancy Drew and all writing for young girls, but I was also reading The Bluest Eye. I was also reading for colored girls. And, these texts, these works really showed me again that like writing was a thing I could do, and that writing about the experience that I was having at that moment as a young Black girl was also a way to spend one's life and to make one's living. And, then I started learning about how education sort of plays into that. I had a phenomenal fifth grade teacher who encouraged me to journal every day. In fact, that was one of our assignments, was this like, yeah, it
Wow.
was very cool.
Yes.
She had us
In
journal
fifth grade, that's one.
fifth grade. Shout out to Amy Cassell. I've actually written
Okay.
about her because she was such a profound kind of influence on me, both as a writer and as a teacher later on.
Yeah.
But she had us journal and then she would collect our journals and just write these little comments on these little post-it notes. And that helped me to recognize not only the importance of developing a practice as a writer, but like thinking about a reader. I had a reader sort of early on who was invested in my work and giving me feedback. Obviously, it was all, positive feedback, but we need that as well as writers. So yeah, it was those early experiences that made me realize that writing was what I wanted to do and that writing was possible as a life path for me.
So I hear
Wow.
the freedom as a young girl to be able to read kind of what you wanted to read. I hear that. And then again, that common thread that goes through a lot of our episodes is that the person or one of the, there's usually one incredible person that shows you, kind of shines that light on your
Yeah.
talent and tells you this is something that you could do. That's
And-
beautiful.
yeah.
And do you still journal now?
Sylvia, it's funny you should ask. Not as much as I should.
No shoulds, I'm boss lead.
Well, you're right. Oh, I love that. Okay, well, I love that. Not as much as I would like to, and
Mhm.
not as much as I plan to in the near future. The
Okay.
academic schedule is one that
Mm,
is challenging.
Mhm.
It's so varied, right?
yes.
It's not, we don't have, every day is different on an academic
Mhm.
schedule. It depends on your teaching schedule. It also depends on what your writing deadlines are, what committee meetings you
Mhm.
have,
Hmm.
and so it's been challenging, especially in the last couple of years, to
Mhm.
maintain a journaling practice.
Hmm.
I'm fortunate enough to be doing a lot of traveling. I'm on the road with, talking about my books and my work.
Yes.
Setting, I've worked out, I know we'll talk about self-care probably in a minute, but I've worked out like a pretty regular workout schedule in terms of like my, sort of physical movement practice.
Yes.
Mhm.
But it's been harder for me to integrate journaling on a regular basis. But it is the summer. We're chatting at the kind of very start of summer for me. And this
Yes.
is the time when I tend to kind of get back into a regular journaling practice. And I'm so excited about that.
And can you just kind
Beautiful.
of explain how your journaling helps your writing?
Yeah, I mean, so in so many ways, I used to have one notebook that was a journal and one notebook that was like a catch-all for, life things, business,
Ideas.
Hmm.
to-do lists and whatever. And then I had
Mhm.
a separate notebook that was where I collected ideas or, phrases that would come to me in my creative work. And
Mhm.
at this point, these are all one book. In fact, I have like three of them. There's one in each of my purses, right? Like I have a notebook in
Yes.
every bag, but they all really are kind of all of the above. And I think of them as a kind of archive of everything that's on my mind. When I
Mhm.
Mhm.
journal in that book, it's very helpful because it helps me to kind of like distill what is about, just me sort of working through what I'm thinking about and what I'm feeling, right? And what is something that will become material for the creative project or the research project that I'm working on. So it becomes
Mhm.
almost like a drafting space for whatever other pieces of writing will come next for me. And, which
Mhm.
is why it's important for that to be a regular practice. Because of course we wake up and have all kinds, especially as thinking people, thinking women, feel
Yes.
people, there's a lot going on internally. And having a space where you can sort of sort it all out and
Hmm.
begin to mold it into whatever it will become is really helpful. And I'm again really looking forward to getting back to having that as like a regular feature of my day to day.
Very cool. So mentioning your books, I don't want to fail to mention all that you've done, and then kind of go into my next thought in terms of your books. I know you wrote Blue Talk Love was your first, The Poetics of Difference, and then most recently Big Girl. Um, and
But
you
the big
mentioned
girl was a New York Times Editor's
I was
Choice
gonna
and
get to
winner
that.
of the
Yes.
2023 Next Generation Indie Book Award for First Novel.
Yes.
I
Yes.
just had to say
Yes.
that.
Thank you.
Yes, yes, and that was, it was in mine as well. And along those lines, you mentioned Toni Morrison, so that's who I caught in the beginning. Who were the other writers or thinkers that shaped your early worldview?
Yes. Toni Morrison is a big one for sure. Ntozake
Hmm.
Shange, who is the author of the
Shange.
Korea poem for colored girls who have considered suicide
Right.
one of their most
Yes,
I mean, she, Morrison, Jamaica Kincaid, these are the folks that I discovered very early on as a kid, sort of reading their works. And I was fortunate enough to meet and get to know Ntozake as a graduate
Really?
student. Yeah,
Wow.
she became a mentor and a friend, in fact. And so that
Wow.
really profound and powerful for me. Audre Lorde also is somebody who, I didn't discover her. I didn't really delve into her work until a little bit later. I was a teenager. But, just as a Black lesbian feminist, poet,
Mhm.
scholar, theorist, her
Mhm.
work has really helped me sort of distill some of my ideas, articulate them as powerfully and sort of succinctly as possible. And she really sort of expands my understanding of like what I can do as a writer. She's somebody who writes in so many different genres, who, tackles ideas about difference and power and identity in really interesting, complex ways. And she just loves language. She believes in the power of language. And so all of those things were really kind of influential for me as I was developing my thought as an adult and developing my writing as an adult. And that's just, I mean, there are so many. I feel like I want to shout out all my writing friends as well.
Beautiful. Yeah, we love it.
Like
Yeah.
having sort of peers or people who are sort of coming up with you as writers
Mhm.
has
Yes.
really been profound. Those relationships have been really important to me as well.
Can you expound a little bit upon the mentorship that you received and because we talk about that, often. I think we, negate that fact when we're, talking to young people. How did you find the mentor, or how did she become part of your life? And how did you identify her as being, one of my mentors?
Yeah, well, this is a great story. I haven't gotten to really tell this story.
Hmm.
So I met her, let me see, how did I first meet Ntozake? I mean, I was a fan from, again, childhood, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
My mother, in fact, was a big fan. So the Korea poem for colored girls first came out in 1975. And at that time, my mother was in her 20s. And that was a profound text and a profound moment for her and
Mhm.
for, Black feminists, Black women, really, I should say, right? I mean,
Mhm.
Hmm.
off Broadway, went to Broadway, this
Yes.
profound exploration of Black women, our bodies. There's a lot of discussion of sexual assault and sexual violence, which we still
Mhm.
Hmm.
haven't really been able to have fully as a culture. And of course,
Right.
Yes.
imagine in the mid 70s. So
Yes.
I was like a Shange stan all my life. And I had the good fortune of meeting her. I can't remember which happened first, but she
Hmm.
there was a conference in her honor at Barnard. She was an alum of Barnard. And I was invited to give a talk at that conference, knowing that she would be there. So, of course, I was just like, terrified, but thrilled and excited. And we got to speak afterward, and she said really nice things about this little talk that I had given. So
Hmm.
that encouraged me to continue to kind of nurture that relationship. We had lunch that day. And simultaneously, a dear friend of mine was a mentee of hers, and her
Hmm.
daughter was becoming a friend of mine. So there were these kind of,
Hmm.
it was interesting parallel of, the kind of
Mhm.
intellectual creative connection, but also
Yeah.
real personal human kind of links and
Hmm. It was
ties.
meant to be.
The
Yeah.
Hmm.
universe was conspiring.
Yes, which
Exactly.
thank you, universe, for that, because that relationship really did become foundational for me again in my sense of possibility of what writing
Mm.
life could be. And I
Hmm.
love that you asked sort of how I identified her as a mentor. I truly didn't. I
Hmm.
wouldn't have dared to identify her as a mentor at that time in my life. And,
Hmm.
I wish I had. In some ways, I wish I had been the bold one to say, hey, I would love
Hmm.
for you to mentor me. It
Yeah.
happened to work out that, she said nice things about my work and we had all of these personal connections. And I had the opportunity to be of service to her. Um, we were
Mm.
living in the same area at the time in Brooklyn, and she needed some
Hmm.
errands run. And I was able to
Wow.
run those errands, and it gave me a chance to really sit with her in a more sort of
Get to know her.
intimate way. And
Beautiful.
she identified me as a mentee. She
Hmm.
was, I guess, interviewed, and she said, "Hey, I just want you to know, I told them that you're my mentee, and they might be calling you." And I said, "Well,
Uh,
thank you for that." And it's such an honor. I also had the opportunity to help organize her homegoing service. She passed in
Mhm.
2018, and
Yeah.
that too was a profound experience for me. Really being able to honor, in a kind of
Yeah.
deep, personal, but
Wow.
wide-reaching way, the impact
Full
that
circle moment. Hmm.
totally, totally. I've
Yeah.
just so much gratitude for that whole relationship. And again, for the ability to be part of, planning and arranging her homegoing was incredible.
That is
Right.
beautiful.
So you mentioned that she actually identified you as the mentee.
Yeah.
If you could go back and say something to that yourself at that point in life, what would you say?
Wow. I mean, I would say I think probably what I did say at the time, which is like, thank you, you know? I mean,
Mm,
like living in and experiencing the gratitude. I remember where I was in that moment when we were on the phone. I was in a little cafe in North Carolina working on the book that would become The Poetics of Difference. And in that book,
Mm,
I write about her work. And I
yeah.
remember sitting in this little coffee shop and having this incredible moment where this person who I have admired and who has shaped my writing, is understanding and identifying me as somebody who is tasked with like taking this legacy forward. So it's this
mhm.
beautiful moment of gratitude, not only for, being seen and that sense of community with her, but also with like
Right.
clarity. Like, okay, you are now part of a trajectory. You are part of a
Mhm.
lineage, and that means there's work to do. And that helped me to feel really sort of galvanized and motivated and supported in doing the work that I wanted to do. So I guess what I would say to myself is like, girl, pay attention, take it in, be grateful, and then like go ahead and do what you need to do.
Yes,
Yeah.
I love
Talk
that.
about Harlem and
Mhm.
growing up in Harlem. Certainly, it has such a history when we talk about Black culture and just kind of talk about how it influences your writing.
Yeah. So, I mean, in so many ways, I mentioned to you, I'm currently in the Dominican Republic, and I grew up in Harlem. I grew up in kind of the northern, kind of western part of Harlem, right? But between Harlem and Washington Heights, Sugar Hill, basically.
Okay. Oh,
Okay.
wow. That has a
Oh, sugar
huge
history.
history. Okay.
Exactly, right? So much history. So there's the literary history of Harlem, and I was fortunate enough to grow up in a family where, again, books were, prioritized, and so we had books all over
Yes.
the place. So I knew about Zora, I knew about Langston,
Mm.
and I also was growing up in the late '80s and into the '90s, where like hip hop is coming through, and so there's this other kind of like
Yes.
Yes. Sugar
cultural.
Hill Gang.
That's
Gang.
right,
Yep.
exactly, exactly. Don't get me to start rapping because y'all don't.
Yeah.
But absolutely right. So the literary culture of Harlem and the literary history of Harlem was both a matter of my kind of like historical grounding in the neighborhood and also my like current moment of growing of age, where I'm hearing hip hop coming in through the radios, through the windows. I'm buying my little bootleg cassette tapes and then later bootleg
Yes.
CDs. And because of the Harlem in general, New York in general, right, is a kind of like global city. Obviously, Harlem is a global
Yes.
multinational village, and it's an Afro-diasporic village. And
Hmm.
where I was, I got to hear merengue in addition to hip hop. I
Hmm.
got to hear
Hmm.
bachata. I got to hear lots of reggae, right? And so then there was, multiple languages being spoken, especially Spanish. And
Hmm.
so the confluence of the kind of like Black American cultural history and language of Harlem that I grew up in, and then the kind of influx and influence of all of these other Black diaspora languages and cultures, that has absolutely shaped my storytelling. It shaped my perspective as a writer. So I'm a Black American writer, but I'm thinking constantly about diaspora connections. The
Hmm.
Poetics of Difference is about Black women and Black queer feminist writers across the diaspora and
Hmm.
drawing links to how we use language in different ways to kind of make comments about politics and power in the US, in the Caribbean, in Europe, on the African continent. And all of that comes from growing up in Harlem. So there's no chance that I would be who I am if not for that early, early experience.
And in your book, Big Girl, you are telling about how things have really changed
Yes.
in Harlem. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what?
Yes, so absolutely. So, Big Girl is about, I think of it as a novel about bodies, about women, about queer people. And I always say it's about the paths we take across generations to make space for
Hmm.
ourselves in the world.
Hmm.
And so it follows this character, Malaya Clondon, from the time she's 8 years old to the time she's a teenager. She is this big Black girl growing up in Harlem. And it takes place from the very late '80s through the mid to late 1990s. And this is a moment where Harlem is changing. This is Malaya's coming of age, right? She is growing
Hmm.
up. She's, kind of constantly being told that her body is wrong, right? So her body is this contested space. But Harlem
Hmm.
itself is also kind of a contested space. Gentrification is happening.
Hmm.
Small mom and pop businesses are disappearing. We're starting to see larger chain restaurants and stores, right, sort of crop up. And that changing landscape of Harlem is an important backdrop for Malaya's own sense of the changes happening within her family, and in the same way that she's trying to kind of figure out how to claim her body for herself, Harlem is a real mirror for that because, residents of Harlem are fighting back. They're fighting against gentrification and trying to negotiate the changing meanings of the neighborhood. And so, for me, Big Girl was a really interesting and really fruitful way to think through, like living through the experience of gentrification. This is something that's happening, of course, in cities all over the globe, really.
Sure.
And Harlem was one of those experiences. I think because it's a neighborhood with such a history, and it's a neighborhood that has such a kind of strong cultural identity. Those changes were pretty palpable. You sort of felt them very quickly when these historical institutions would suddenly close, because now a GNC is cropping up or, a new HMV record store, right, is coming up. And so it was important to me to write about that experience.
You brought up Malaya. So in terms of, I can understand you grew up in Harlem and how that becomes relevant in your writing. How about Malaya? Where does the character come from? How do you come up with the characters in your book as a writer who has not done any fiction?
Yeah, I mean, so I always say Malaya's story is very similar to mine. There are lots of places where our stories overlap. Harlem, right, is one of those, sort of geographic places. There are many experiences that she has had that I have had, and many experiences that she has in the book that are drawn from experiences I've had. But there's also a lot of difference between us, and that's where the fun of creative work comes in for me. Imagining a character who experiences things and goes through things that I may have gone through, but maybe handles them differently, looks at the world a little bit differently. And so the where she comes from is my experience. But then she sort of, as a character takes over. And the fun part is getting to like learn about this character who's separate from me, So she's definitely like a little bit, she's like she has a little edge to her. She's a little spicier than I was at that age, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there are lots of ways in which, and yet at the same time, she's quiet. So her spice is more internal. Her is a lot of sort of narrative exploration of what she wants to say and what she thinks and what she feels. And like she's, kind of quick-witted, but she takes her time in expressing herself. And I wasn't quite that way when I was a child. So certain differences between us. But again, that's where the joy of fiction writing comes in for me. It's like learning about the world of the story through the characters.
Yeah, and certainly times now. So we mentioned about the gentrification of Harlem. I'm from Inglewood, and
Okay.
Inglewood is a very different place now. We have we will obliquely call them the changes in Washington with the new president.
Yes.
There's a huge trial that shall remain nameless that sort of talks about Black bodies and music and a Harlemite as I think about this.
Hey, we don't claim everybody, but yes.
Exactly. All skin folk are not kinfolk. I understand.
Okay.
But what does Black feminist thought kind of offer us in this really tumultuous moment?
Yeah. I love this question. So we think about the concept of intersectionality, right? Which is a term that, is used more and more frequently in, sort of like common discussions. You'll see it, in memes and GIFs, and it circulates on social media. But one of the many things that Black feminism offers us is a framework of intersectionality that is useful in both our personal and our political lives. And so from a Black feminist standpoint, right, intersectionality, which is a Black feminist concept, it originates in the work of legal studies scholar Kimberly Crenshaw. And she's basically using this as a way to describe the particular influence and the impact of both race and gender-based oppression on Black women. So often you'll hear the term being used to just be like, yeah, I got red hair and I'm from, Oakland, and I'm allergic to nuts, and that's intersectionality, right? And it's like, no, it's actually not that. It's about, it's about structures of power and how they impact our lives, right? How they impact our lives in sort of multiple ways. So Black feminism offers us this framework to really think about what power does, sort of the nuances of what power does in our lives. And it gives us a way of kind of thinking against that, talking back to that, working against that creatively and politically. And so, scholars like Crenshaw then sort of, give us a language for what people like Audre Lorde and Bell Hooks and Alice Walker have been saying for decades, right? That like the experiences we have as Black women are influenced by racial and gender-based oppression,
Hmm.
also by classism, also by homophobia or heteronormativity,
Yes.
also by cissexism or transphobia, also by ableism, by fat phobia, right? And all of these
Hmm.
forces and structures shape the world that we live in. And we have power within those structures to name them, to teach one another about them, and to make choices in our personal lives that kind of combat and resist and ensure our survival. And you mentioned the current state of the world, both in terms of what's happening politically in Washington, what's happening culturally in courtrooms in New York and elsewhere,
Hmm.
right? Black feminism gives us a way, first of all, to think about how those two structures fit together, right? Like the
Hmm.
systemic and policy and structural concerns that we might think of as sort of separate from the lives of our hearts and our minds and our bodies. They are not, in fact, separate. And Black feminism gives us a way to historicize those connections and then think about like how we can move in that context. To me, I think it's always the time for Black feminism, but certainly right now is absolutely the time, and I'm
Mhm.
glad that we're hearing a kind of resurgence in conversations about Black feminism for that reason.
So, Dr. Sullivan, I have to say, I mean, we're nowhere close to being halfway through with this interview, but I just feel like I would have loved to have been in your class.
Oh my God.
I remember
Absolutely.
my English course, my mandatory English course at Texas A&M, and I could not wait for it to end. But
Absolutely.
I mean, again, I've heard you, in person, and just everything that you speak about and the language that you use and the passion that you have. I mean, I feel like I could have been a writer if I had taken your class. A writer of even particularly fiction,
Oh.
but. Along those lines, what advice do you have for emerging writers who want to tell stories that maybe challenge the dominant narratives, and just think that maybe I could, but I'm not sure. What's the advice that you give?
Well, first I need to say you are a writer, of course, and you still
I
be a writer of fiction. And in some
yes.
ways that's the advice that I would give to a writer at any stage, really, is like write and don't
Mm.
hesitate to write, don't be afraid to write, figure out how you write best. And by that I
Mhm,
mean figure out what kind of writing interests you most. I'm a
mhm,
firm believer that, especially if writing is not your job, it has to involve some sense of joy, right? Audre Lorde has say
Mm.
poetry is
yes.
not a luxury. And she talks
Mhm,
about how our relationship with feeling is crucial in any action we want to take in the world, and writing can help us
mhm,
do that. So if you have
mhm,
feelings or thoughts about things, committing them to language is
mhm,
itself a political act. And then sharing that language by writing it down and, either sending it to your homegirl or publishing it on a major press, right? Whatever the case may
mhm,
be. That too is a political act. So
mhm,
it starts with the doing of it, right? Feeling the feelings,
Mm.
having the ideas, and trying to commit them to language, trying to find the best way to express them.
Mm.
And then I would also say reading, right? And for me, even in,
Mm.
in this conversation, it's very
yes.
difficult for me to talk about writing without talking about reading. And
Mhm,
that is partly because I think reading gives us that sense of what we're interested in, who we're writing
Mm.
with, who are our kind of thought partners, who are our literary or imaginative communities.
mhm,
That helps you to feel seen, it helps you to feel held, witnessed, right? Especially if you're writing about experiences that are not sort of widely accepted or widely celebrated in the common
mhm.
culture. So for me, writing about big Black queer women, right?
Yeah.
And especially big Black queer children, right? Like this
Yes.
little girl,
Yes.
Malaya, she is not a celebrated figure in dominant American culture. So I
Mhm,
needed to create a kind of culture of literary heroes who would understand why I wanted to celebrate her. You know what I mean? And
mhm,
constantly read the works that would nourish me as I was writing that book. And so I would say to
mhm,
anyone who is thinking about beginning a life as a writer,
mhm,
write, do the work, write, but also read and figure out like who you need to be
Mm.
reading to feed the
mhm.
writing practice.
Very
So
great.
summer is
Great advice.
here, and I think of summer as one of my favorite times if I have vacation,
Yes.
to curl up with a good book.
Yes.
What's on your summer reading list?
Ooh, okay, I like this one. My read list is always just like, miles high. Right now, I'm reading Nnedi Okorafor's new book, Death of the Author, which I recommend for anybody who is thinking about a writing life. It's a really interesting kind of like, you know, complex, sci-fi kind of fantastical exploration of this disabled Black woman writer. I don't want to give too much away,
Right. No,
but
no
Okay.
spoilers.
yeah, no spoilers, but it comments on a lot of the things that we're talking about, what it means to be a writer, what it means to set up a writing life, especially in a context where, yeah, sort of intersecting oppressions are shaping your life
Mhm.
experience. So
Hmm.
recommend that one. I am also reading Ocean Vuong's new book. And of course, I'm blanking on the title, but it's everyone is talking about it, and so I had to just grab a copy of it.
Mhm.
A new novel. I don't want to mess with the title, so I'll let you
Okay.
maybe we'll put it in the description
In
or
the notes,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, sure, we will.
Reading James, so Percival Everett's James,
Oh,
right?
yes,
Kind of like
yes.
Hmm.
reimagining of Huck Finn. It came out probably a little over a year ago, but this is the
Yes.
thing with an academic schedule is like you mostly are reading what you're teaching or reading what you're lecturing on, you know? So this
Love
is
that.
time to finally delve into James again.
Yes.
And many more. My to read list is like super high, but that's what's on tap right now.
Okay, quick question. Any thoughts on audio?
Yes. Yes, I do have thoughts on audiobooks. I mean, I cannot understand any reason to create barriers to literature in any way. If
Mhm.
audio is how you get your reading in, yes to audio. You know what I mean? I'm like,
Okay.
go for it. Now, I do feel like, the economics of it are complicated, right? When we start
Mhm.
offering books
Hmm.
on audio for free and in ways
How
that
about that?
compensate
Yeah.
authors, right? And
Hmm.
Yes.
kind of, especially for
Compromise.
authors who are either self-published or who are published on independent presses that really need those resources, right? That I
Yes.
think is more complicated.
Okay.
But to me, there's the kind of like paradigmatic question of like, is audio listening reading? And I'm like,
Right.
absolutely it is. Like if you are encountering words, if they are making you think, if they are changing the way you kind of move through the world, yes, it
Hmm.
absolutely counts as reading. And you know what? Even if it doesn't count as reading to whomever, do it anyway, right? Like there's
Hmm.
no, to me, I'm like, it's like, there's no reason to create barriers, cultural or otherwise, to people
Right.
accessing literature. So that's my opinion.
Love that.
What do y'all think?
Love that. I'm still reading because honestly,
Yeah.
a lot of mine does come from, audio, just because of the life, that we live, and it's so challenging. So some of my time to read is when I'm in the car,
Yeah,
or if I'm on a walk. And so, yeah, I do find, and I do stop. I may take notes, so I may, and so I feel like I'm still engaged, and certainly learning. So, yeah.
absolutely. I mean, it's like,
It's still though it just sometimes I feel like a fraud if I don't have and literally like
sure,
that paper in my
right.
hands, and that is my favorite way to read. But if I again, my books will stack up if I don't do some of the audio. So
Exactly.
yeah.
I feel the same way. And so I have many books, both in hardcover and on audio and on Kindle. And
Yeah.
to
Oh,
me, it's like, because
wow.
if I want to read it, I'm going to find the way to read it. And that's what, in whatever way is most convenient. And of course, we're
Yeah.
living in a world where, materiality, right? Like the physical thing of the book is
Hmm.
wonderful. I think for many of us, that's the preferred way to get into a
Hmm.
but
Yes.
our world is increasingly like less material, And I
Yeah.
think we have to
Hmm.
acknowledge that and accept that. I'm here to say I don't think that you're a fraud for listening to audiobooks.
Well, thank you. And I will definitely take that as
Yeah,
my indication that I'm doing the right thing,
do
because if
it.
it's coming
Do it.
from you, and I respect your thought. So
Yeah.
you were
I
mentioning,
like a book though.
yeah,
I like the
yeah.
process of going. I go to Brave and Kind bookshop in Atlanta, or I go to Cherish bookshop,
Yes.
and I meander around
Yes.
and I buy the book. Now,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
granted, there are some lists that I look at sometimes to decide, oh, I need to buy this book. But
Hmm.
oftentimes it's that interaction in the bookshop, and you're like, oh, wow, this cover is beautiful, kind of like
Yeah.
buying
Hmm.
wine for me. So,
Yes.
yeah, I like a book, but they do stack up at home.
And
Yeah.
stacking up at home is, I think, also a beautiful thing, And Sylvia, I'm so
Hmm.
glad you said that because absolutely, we do need those physical spaces, right? We need those
Hmm.
physical spaces. First of all, like both of you, I think I just enjoy the pleasure of like holding a book in my hand.
Yes.
I
Hmm.
enjoy turning the page. I'm
Yes.
a sensory person, so I'm like, I like the smell of the paper. I like to
Yes.
Hmm.
feel, is it a glossy cover? Is it a matte cover?
Yes.
You know what I mean? So I'm into the
All of it.
bodily experience of the book.
Hmm.
I also know that not everybody is that way. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And so there's that accessibility issue as well. We need,
Hmm.
we need the physical space and we need other ways to access literature.
Yes.
And I appreciate, Sylvia, what you said also about, yeah, the bookstore and the library as spaces of discovery.
Yes.
right? Where it's like you
Favorite
might
place.
just be,
Yes.
yeah, you're wandering in and maybe you think you just want this one book, but because
Mhm.
of the way that these spaces are arranged and artistically kind of
Mhm.
curated, next to the book that you're looking for might be the book that is looking for you, right?
Ah,
And you get to
Absolutely.
pick up both and you get to, yeah, feel them and sit with them and sort of see and discover. So I think, we need both. And
yes.
Mhm.
I just sometimes I wonder if maybe there's a distraction tactic at play that pits these two ways of reading against one another, right?
Mm.
Like
Yes.
just the idea that you sort of have to choose whether
Mhm.
physical text or audio text are better. Maybe
Yeah.
that
Mhm.
is actually like kind of an anti-literate move to
Mm.
make us feel like we're frauds if we try to read
Yeah.
one way or another, you
But
know?
it's also very American because it's always either or.
Absolutely.
There's, you know,
Absolutely.
and I'm trying to incorporate and in the second
And
half of my life
I love
because it's neither,
Yes.
it's
that's
neither
right.
neither.
That's
So
right.
yeah,
It's all
it,
of the above, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
absolutely. And definitely a shout out to libraries and librarians who are a
Mm.
wealth of information as far as what your next book you can consider. But if you could have everyone read one book, and I
Mm.
know this is a tough question,
Yeah.
is there one book that you're like, oh, everyone should read this?
It is a very tough question. And I kind of have two answers, if
I
that's
like that.
okay.
Yeah,
But it's
and yes,
yes, yeah, that's right. That's right. Yes. And also, my friend is always talking about how I always say and also. And
I
so
And
love it.
and
also.
also. So the one book that I would recommend that everybody read is Audre Lorde's Zami. She calls it a biomythography. It's ZAMI, and it's a kind of self narrative. It's a version of her life that's multi-genre. It's a kind of memoir, but it also, as the title biomythography suggests, right, incorporates myth. There are elements of fiction. Lorde is a
Wow.
poet, so there's a lot of poetry.
Hmm.
There's song. Um,
Mm.
so it's this sort of like multi-genre, genre crossing text about her life as a fat, black, ambidextrous, half-blind, mother of two, feminist icon.
Mm.
And that text really sort of it stirred something in me at a very early age and
Mm.
has continued to stay with me and make me sort of think differently about all the things we're talking about, difference, power,
Mm.
identity, and the kind of power and meaning of language. So that's my like one answer. But
Okay.
another answer is you need to read the book that sort of gives you direction, the book that you've always been curious about, the book that you've always been thinking, you know what, maybe I should read this, the book that people keep telling you, hey, you would really like to read this, or I think you
Mm.
read
Mm.
this, right? I think for many of us, we have these sort of, relationships with authors and with texts that we think we have an idea of what this book is, but we just haven't
Mm.
gotten around to reading it.
Mm.
I say read that book, right? Like read that book that might sort of give you direction, chart the next steps of your path in life,
Mm.
in your work, in your thinking. I believe that's sort of in mind for a lot of us, and we just haven't gotten around to reading it. And I believe that like reading that book might be the pathway toward a kind of, longer, deeper relationship with reading and with writing that might be really fruitful for all of us.
Was there a
So
book
maybe
like
so
that
maybe
for
Big Girl.
you?
Big Girl, right? Also read Big
Yes.
Girl. So the book like that for me was actually Zami. So it's actually both of them.
Okay.
Like I remember
Okay.
sort of hearing about Zami and even hearing about Lord. She's a figure, I think probably a
Hmm.
lot of folks have this relationship with her. It's a name
Yes.
that people are using a lot. I have to say, I have to give a shout out to Alexis Pauline Gumbs, whose incredible biography of Lord came out about a little over probably a year ago now, that has
Hmm.
helped sort of crystallize, right, this kind of, resurgence of real kind
Hmm.
of serious attention to Lord. Again, she's a name that comes up often, but that many people
Hmm.
haven't really had the chance, right, to kind of
Yeah.
like explore and encounter.
Hmm.
Bell Hooks is another one, right? Who hear the
Yes.
name, but like have we
Hmm.
read Bell Hooks? Hurston. And of course, it's not, to me coincidental that a lot of these figures are Black women writers
Hmm.
Hmm.
names we may know, but whose work we may not have really kind of like sat with and
Hmm.
encountered, right? And sort of taken in. And so that's something that I hope we all do.
So you are weaving this fabric of, I think, a beautiful tapestry of what has shaped you, what you like to read, what we can read, and I honestly cannot wait for a show note so I can actually make my list.
Sure.
But I'd like to know what you're currently working on and any upcoming projects you're excited about.
Yeah, a couple of things. So I will say first, and I realize I think that this podcast will come out just after this event, but I just still want to mention that there may be a recording. So,
Sure.
DC World Pride. World Pride is happening in DC this year, and
Wow.
it's happening right now as we speak. And it goes until June 8th, I believe. And so,
Okay.
as part of DC World Pride, I will have the opportunity to be in conversation with the phenomenal Black South African photographer and visual activist Zanele Maholi. And we're doing a talk to celebrate Maholi's most recent book, Somnyama Ngonyama, which is an incredible photo essay kind of self-portraits with these bits of text by writers, many of whom we've mentioned in this conversation. And so it's a beautiful series, and we're having this conversation to celebrate the second volume of the book at the National Museum for Women in the Arts in DC. So I've been
When is this?
It's a great
What's the
location.
date?
this is next Wednesday, May 28th.
And can people still get tickets, or is it free?
Yes.
Free?
It's free, and tickets are available on the museum's website. So it's the National Museum for Women in the Arts. And I'm just so excited about this conversation, really looking forward to it. Yeah, I mean, Zanelli and I were talking about this yesterday as we were kind of planning the discussion and thinking about how more than ever, I think, or as much as ever, this is the time to recognize that Pride is about more than a party or a parade, right? Like, Pride is about a political movement. It's about kind of radical gathering, and it's about radical creative expression. The beauty of Black people and the beauty of Black queer people is revolutionary. Our art is revolutionary. And so I'm excited about this conversation. I mentioned it even as our podcast will come out after the discussion, there may be a recording and certainly some evidence online of
To reference.
what went down.
Yes.
So I hope people get to kind of get into that. And creatively, so I'm working on, I'm like keeping it close to the vest right now.
Okay.
Nice experience, but I'll say it's a novel that's about Black queer history.
Okay.
And it sort of taps into a lot of the things that we've talked about, again, history, legacy, lineage, diaspora. And again, the power of language in our defining and redefining who we are in the world.
Wonderful. Well, you have an open invitation when the book comes
Absolutely.
out to come back and we can further discuss your latest work.
I would love that. I'll be here.
Absolutely.
Excellent. And before we get you out of here, we always ask about self-care. And earlier in our conversation, you alluded to sort of journaling and exercise as a part of your self-care regime. But can you elaborate a little more?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the first thing that comes to mind when I think about my self-care practices is my movement practice, which, shifts depending on time and place, right? I mean, most often it's a workout of some kind every morning. But, sometimes that's dance. Sometimes, like, for a long time, I was doing kickboxing, which was great.
Oh, fun.
I was doing Muay Thai, which was wonderful, right? And I like to not even challenge myself, but like, treat myself to exploring different forms of movement. And
Treat yourself.
yeah, right?
Absolutely love that.
We often think about exercise, first of all, as an imperative, as a burden, as something that's meant to change us, you know what I mean? And change our bodies. And so shifting to thinking about a movement practice that's about new experiences, right? And like
I love it.
discovering my body's capacities and discovering what feels good to my body.
Yes.
That has been transformational. And, that's a lot of that sort of comes from actually writing Big Girl and understanding, the character in Big Girl comes to a similar conclusion, not to spoil too much, but her trajectory is trying to figure out how to like own her body, right? And sort of understand her body and understand our bodies as sources of joy, pleasure, and power for us rather than objects of desire or ridicule or control for others. And so, incorporating that into a movement practice has been self-care for me. And then the other thing that I've done more and more regularly and consciously is just like something, it seems super banal, it's very basic, but just like being present. People talk about meditation, and I am somebody who like, meditation is a struggle for me because of course, as soon as I get right there, like focus on your breathing, and I'm like, oh no, my breathing is off.
Like squirrel.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, wait, breathe. Okay, let me breathe. Okay, breathe. Don't think. And then you're supposed to like let the thoughts pass by. And I'm like,
Yes.
Just note them. Note the
Note them. You can acknowledge them and let them go.
Right. That is a struggle. I'm not gonna say it doesn't work for me, but it is something that I struggle with. But what I am able to do and what I have been able to cultivate a practice of is just being in the moment, like noticing the
Mhm.
moment, noticing how I feel. And a lot of it has to do with beauty, noticing what
Mhm.
is beautiful in my surroundings and just like spending
Mhm.
time looking at it, feeling it, hearing it, tasting it, whatever the case may be. That
Yeah.
has been really grounding. And it's just a helpful reminder that like time is our most valuable resource.
Mhm.
Like
Yes.
this moment is our most valuable moment, right?
Hmm.
It's the
Hmm.
last time we'll ever have it. And it sounds woo-woo and it is woo-woo.
It's true
It's
though.
also real.
It's so true. Yeah.
Yeah,
Real.
We're all dying, some of us faster than others.
that's
Mhm.
it. That's it. And we're
Mhm.
also all living, right?
Yes.
At the
Right.
same
We're in
time,
the
That's
living
the part.
business.
right?
And
Yes.
And
I
that's what this moment offers us.
Hmm.
Yeah, love everything that you mentioned. We in lifestyle medicine, instead of focusing on exercise, which tends to be a bad word for a lot of people, it's just physical activity. And I love the concept of move, just move.
That's
And exactly what you said is what I try to tell patients. Just identify things that you like to do, not what somebody else is telling you to do, but what you like to do, whether it's dance,
yes.
kickboxing. Those are beautiful, just things that are gift to yourself to learn, other things, or just, a nice nature bath, being out, walking in nature. And if you don't like nature and you got allergies, then walk inside or go to the mall. Don't stop in the store. There's
Yes.
so many things that we can do. But I think if you think of it as you allude to, like a gift to yourself, something you're giving yourself, then it's more attainable, something that you want to do versus something that you have to do.
Exactly.
So thank you for that. That's beautiful.
Yeah, and
Love
I
all
just
of
add,
that.
I mean, for me, it really is about recognizing that our bodies are our own, right? There are so
Hmm.
many structures and sort of
Yes.
locations in the world that want us to feel that our bodies are not for us, that our bodies are
Hmm.
for others. No, our
Hmm.
bodies are our own, right? And we get
Yeah.
to enjoy them, we get to care for them, we get to use them,
Hmm.
we get to sort of make use of their power. And that's what
Yes.
that practice does.
Very nice. Love
Well,
that
Dr.
so
Mecca,
much.
Jamilah Sullivan, we thank you at Boss
Yeah.
Leap. How can our listeners follow you?
Yes, you can find me on all the places. Instagram, I'm Mecca Jamilah on Instagram. I'm still on Facebook. Shout out to the exennials. Here we are, still trying to make it work. I'm on other platforms as well, but Instagram is pretty much the place where I, kind of do most of my engagement.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm pretty easy to find. My website is meccajamilahsullivan.com. And yeah, I'm around. I'm in these streets, so I look forward to
You outside.
I'm
Awesome.
Wow.
outside. Hey, especially this summer, ready to
Yeah.
be outside.
Yes.
Yes, and you enjoy the rest of your weekend. We're so grateful that you took out time to be with us. We're grateful for the work that you're doing to
Mhm.
empower women of color, queer women. Just just sharing joy and love, and that's what we like to do on this show. So we're again very grateful and can't wait to hear about the project that's under wraps. And you have an open invitation, so we can learn more. And until we meet again, may you be well.
Love it. Thank you so much. This has been fantastic.
What an amazing interview. We were so honored to speak with Dr. Mecca Jamilah Sullivan. I, again, from experience, knew that she's just, dynamic in terms of what she has to say. It's just, it comes out effortlessly, and she had so much to offer. And I
You
have
were
a
spot
list.
on.
Yeah, I have a list. Well, thank you. A list of things that I want to read now.
Oh my goodness.
Um,
Her author
things,
list there.
yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. And I mean, it goes back from, things that I meant to read when I was, a teenager and young
Mhm.
20s to, newer works, including, all of hers. But yeah, so much to share in terms of pearls of wisdom. I'll let you go first and tell me what some of the things are that you were able to take away.
And just as you were saying, my book list has increased,
Hmm.
probably at least by threefold. And
Yeah.
as I think about it, I'm like, oh, I haven't read a whole lot of Audre Lorde. Oh,
Yeah.
I haven't read Jamaica Kincaid. There's just people
Yes.
that I intend to read that I
Hmm.
haven't quite gotten to.
Hmm.
And she mentioned one of the things that she talked about is reading the book that someone says to you that maybe you might enjoy this. And our co-author and sister friend of the show, Jessica Osborne, is an awesome person who recommends books for me. And actually, in fact, Denise, her sister, sent me a book very recently. She's like, "Hey, have you read this?" So my book list has increased. Dr. Sullivan talked to us about writing, not just for the purposes of creating a book or nonfiction or fiction, but writing must have a sense of joy, and that our internal feelings, we convert that to language. And then that language is certainly the things that we share with our friends, our loved ones, or we share with the world in forms of a book. And then kind of finally, my favorite expression that I learned from you, which I think is from Parks and Recreation, is treat yourself. So we want to treat our bodies with a form of movement that feels best for our bodies. So just so many take homes that we learned from Dr. Sullivan. What resonated most with you?
I was just full at the end. Several things. The one that you mentioned in terms of recommending books for others. So I admittedly will tell you that some of the books on her list were things that I meant to read when I was a teenager, things that I definitely had on my list when I was in my 20s, and now there's new things still haven't been read. And what I've found that there are certain things that if I read it and I tell my daughters about it, then they'll read it. And so for me, it's always kind of in terms of like kind of that mom feeling of I educate myself to help educate my kids.
But you also share stuff with me. You're like, "Oh, I read this." I'm like, "Oh, well, let me read this as well." So it works. Yes.
I do in terms of friendships, but I guess just the times that we're living in right now, there's so much that I think we should not forget, and a lot of the literature that's out there. So I've got a big reading list now. One of the other things that she talked about was journaling. And for me, what I got from the conversation is I now have my permission to write everything in my day planner, because that is where I typically, I write my to-dos, but sometimes my ideas are in there and I don't know, where should I jot this down? And then just, your day-to-day journaling. So if I can keep it, in a little bit more, in more confined space, then I may actually get all the tasks done. So I liked that idea, but I do know the value of journaling, and making it part of your daily practice can make a difference for so many things in terms of organization.
I'm going to interrupt you for a moment. And because when I think of journaling, for me, I'm like, I gotta write down my feelings like a diary. But I think I have morphed journaling into, I love a list. So a list of things. So my gratitude practice, I'm certainly talked about already, is I just make a simple list of the things that I'm grateful for. But I also know that in my sort of journals of dreams or future projects, again, it's a list of things. So I'd like for my home to look like this. I'd like to go to this beach. I want to enjoy this experience. So I want to just kind of open up the word of journaling for it may not be anything formal. I do use my notes section in my phone as well to kind of keep track of ongoing things that I'm interested in. So I want us to just play with the word journal.
Right.
I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
And maybe, your definition of journaling, because I think that's a valid point. It can be different for everyone. And then lastly, I love her character in, this most recent book that she wrote, Big Girl Malaya, and how she addresses, her adolescent weight, her body image, family expectations, and just, I think, another light shined on what we sometimes do in our community in body shaming, and how we still have a long way to go, I think, particularly from, what I hear from, patients. I'm certainly, and I do find it's a little bit a hard thing to balance in terms of being a physician, because you never want to shame anyone. And so I always encourage, women to celebrate their bodies. What are your thoughts
And
there?
I think what I would just add is we are going to be grateful for where we are now. And Dr. Sullivan reminded us that our bodies are a source of joy, pleasure, and power for ourselves. And if we can remember that, then that allows us to embrace where we are currently. And then if there are little tweaks, because we're all growing and aging, if we are lucky, and that just gives us an opportunity to kind of make those tweaks, because we know the things that we do today impact the future.
Our body in the future.
So yeah, our bodies are joy, pleasure, and power for ourselves.
I love that. And I think we'll end on that. I loved that sentiment. And, I guess we take something from every interview that we do, and that will be my final takeaway. So I appreciate you bringing that up as well.
And we want to thank all of our listeners, or if you're watching us on YouTube, please share, like, listen, follow, and subscribe. If there are topics that you'd love for us to talk about, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at our website, bossleappodcast.com. That's boss, L-E-A-P, podcast.com.
Until we meet again, may you be well.
May you be well.
That's a wrap on another episode of Boss Leap. May this conversation enlighten your path toward personal growth and professional empowerment. For more thought-provoking and eye-opening discussions like this one, head to our website at bossleappodcast.com. Always remember to celebrate your wins and trust yourself. A positive mindset can push you out of your comfort zone and into far greater heights. Until next time, may you be well.
Before we go, there's one more thing the lawyers have asked us to include. It's the legal language, and you know how doctors love lawyers. This podcast is presented only for educational and entertainment purposes. Although we are doctors, on this show, we are just your friends. This podcast is not intended as a substitute for the advice of your physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professionals. Understood? Awesome. We'll see you in the next episode.